Imagine a sleek black limo pulling up to the grand entrance of the Voss Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago on a rainy evening. Out steps Alexander Voss, the 34-year-old CEO millionaire, his sharp blue tailored suit glistening under the lights, blue eyes sharp as steel. He's here incognito for a surprise audit. No one knows the owner is walking among them, but as he strides through the lobby, a tiny voice pierces the air. "Mister, can I wash your plates if you give me your leftovers?" Alexander freezes. Before him stands a beautiful 6-year-old girl with golden hair and piercing blue eyes, her dress ragged, face smeared with dirt. She's trembling, clutching a worn teddy bear. Why is this child alone in his hotel? And what secret hunger drives her desperate plea? Alexander's heart skips. Is she lost, or something worse? The rain lashed against the towering glass facade of the Voss Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the restless pulse of the city. Alexander Voss, the 34-year-old CEO whose empire spanned continents, stepped out of his sleek black limo, his sharp blue tailored suit catching the glow of the hotel's golden lights. His piercing blue eyes scanned the entrance with the precision of a man accustomed to control, here for a surprise audit to ensure his flagship property met his exacting standards. No one knew the billionaire owner was among them, his presence cloaked in secrecy. The lobby buzzed with the clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of wealthy guests, their lives a world apart from the storm-soaked streets outside. Alexander's polished shoes clicked across the marble floor, his mind already racing through spreadsheets and renovation plans, when a small, trembling voice cut through the opulence like a shard of glass. "Mister, can I wash your plates if you give me your leftovers?" He froze, his breath catching as if the world had tilted. Slowly, he turned to find a tiny figure standing alone near the grand staircase, her golden hair matted from the rain, her blue eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. She was no more than 6. Her dress threadbare, clinging to her small frame, and her dirt-smudged face betrayed a hunger that clawed at Alexander's heart. This was Lily, clutching a tattered teddy bear as if it were her only anchor in a sea of indifference. Her words hung in the air, fragile yet heavy, a desperate plea that pierced the armor of his meticulously ordered life. Alexander's first instinct was to look away. After all, he'd built his fortune by focusing on the big picture, not the small, messy details of human suffering, but those eyes, so strikingly like his own, held him captive, stirring a memory he couldn't place, a flicker of something lost. The hotel staff bustled around them, oblivious, as guests in glittering attire swept past, their laughter jarring against Lily's quiet courage. Alexander's throat tightened. He'd seen poverty before, but never this close, never in the shadow of his own creation. "Why are you alone?" he managed, his voice softer than he intended, betraying the turmoil beneath his polished exterior. Lily's lips quivered, and she whispered, "I just want to eat. Please." The weight of her words crushed him, exposing a crack in his carefully constructed world. He knelt, his suit creasing against the cold marble, bringing himself to her level, and for the first time in years he felt the sting of vulnerability. Around them, the storm raged on, rain streaking the windows like tears, mirroring the storm brewing in his chest. Was she lost, abandoned, or something far worse? And why, in this moment, did his heart scream that he couldn't walk away? The lobby's golden glow seemed to dim, the world narrowing to this tiny girl and her impossible question, a question that threatened to unravel everything Alexander thought he knew about himself. The echo of Lily's plea lingered in Alexander's ears, her small voice a haunting melody that drowned out the clatter of the Voss Grand Hotel's opulent lobby. Kneeling on the cold marble, his tailored blue suit creased and forgotten, Alexander Voss stared into the 6-year-old's wide blue eyes, their depth pulling at a buried chord in his soul. Rain battered the windows, a relentless reminder of the world's cruelty just beyond his empire's gilded walls. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking, as if he feared her answer might shatter him. Lily's tiny hands clutched her tattered teddy bear tighter, its faded fur damp from the storm she'd braved to reach him. "Mommy's sick," she whispered, her golden hair falling across her dirt-streaked face. "We live in the alley behind the big trash cans. I haven't eaten in 3 days. Her words sliced through Alexander, each syllable a jagged edge exposing the hollow truth of his wealth, millions in his accounts, yet this child starved in his shadow. He swallowed hard, his throat tight with a guilt he hadn't felt in years, a guilt that whispered of his own childhood, scraping by on scraps after his parents died. The memory stung. Cold nights, empty stomachs, and a world that didn't care. He glanced at the hotel's restaurant, where guests savored plates of seared steak and buttery lobster, their laughter a cruel contrast to Lily's trembling frame. "Come with me," he said, standing and offering his hand, his voice firm but laced with a tenderness he didn't recognize. Lily hesitated, her eyes darting to the bustling staff, fear flickering as she whispered, "Please don't tell anyone. They'll take me away." Her words stopped him cold, a chill running down his spine. Take her where? To a system that might swallow her whole? Alexander's heart pounded, his usual control slipping as he led her toward the kitchen, ignoring the curious glances of a passing waiter. The heat of the moment pressed against him, a mix of urgency and dread, as if this child's fate was now tethered to his own. He pushed open the kitchen doors, the clatter of pots and sizzle of pans a jarring backdrop to Lily's fragile presence. "Stay here," he told her, his blue eyes locking onto hers, promising safety in a world that had offered her none. The chef, a burly man with a flour-dusted apron, raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Alexander murmured, "Get her something warm, soup, bread, anything." Lily's small hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that felt like a plea for more than food. As she sat on a stool, her teddy bear clutched like a lifeline, Alexander's mind raced. Why was she here, in his hotel, of all places? The question gnawed at him, stirring a restless unease. He noticed a waiter lingering nearby, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Had he seen too much? Alexander's pulse quickened, his instincts screaming that this moment was no accident, that Lily's presence was a thread pulling at the fabric of his carefully ordered life. The storm outside roared louder, as if urging him to act, to choose between the safety of his empire and the risk of caring for a child who'd already cracked his guarded heart. The kitchen of the Voss Grand Hotel hummed with frenetic energy, steam rising from simmering pots and the sharp clink of knives slicing through fresh herbs. But for Alexander Voss, the world had narrowed to the small figure perched on a stool, her golden hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. Lily's blue eyes, wide with a mix of awe and hunger, followed the chef as he slid a steaming bowl of vegetable soup and a thick slice of crusty bread before her, the aroma curling around them like a warm embrace. Alexander stood close, his tailored blue suit out of place amid the chaos, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar ache as he watched her small hands tremble, reaching for the spoon. She ate with a quiet ferocity, each sip a battle against the gnawing emptiness of 3 days without food, her tattered teddy bear resting beside her like a silent guardian. The sight tore at him, a visceral reminder of his own boyhood nights, stomach twisted with hunger, dreaming of a kindness that never came. He leaned against the counter, his blue eyes softening, the weight of his empire, his audits, his wealth, dissolving in the face of this child's raw need. "Thank you, mister," Lily murmured between bites, her voice so small it nearly drowned in the kitchen's clamor, yet it struck him like a thunderclap, stirring a warmth he'd long buried. He knelt beside her, brushing a crumb from her cheek, his fingers lingering as if to anchor her to this moment of safety. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice thick, catching, on emotions he couldn't name. The chef glanced over, his gruff face softening, but the lingering waiter from the lobby hovered near the door, his gaze sharp, suspicious, as if weighing whether to report this unusual scene. Alexander's jaw tightened, instinct told him to protect Lily, to shield her from whatever system threatened to take her away, as she'd feared. He pulled out his phone, texting his assistant to delay the audit, his focus now wholly on the girl who'd wandered into his world. "Is it good?" he asked, forcing a smile, and Lily nodded, her eyes brightening for the first time, a spark of trust flickering there. But as she reached for her teddy bear, it slipped to the floor, and a small faded photograph fluttered out, landing at Alexander's feet. He bent to pick it up, his breath hitching as he glimpsed the image. A young man with striking blue eyes, a face that mirrored his own from a decade ago. His heart lurched, a sudden, dizzying sense of recognition clawing at him, though he couldn't place why. Lily snatched the photo back, clutching it close, her voice barely a whisper. "That's my daddy. But he's gone." The words landed like a stone in his chest, heavy with unspoken questions. Who was this man in the photo? And why did it feel like a ghost from his own past staring back at him? The kitchen's heat pressed in, the clatter fading as Alexander's mind spun, caught between the urge to dig deeper and the fear of what he might find. The waiter stepped closer, his voice low. "Mr. Voss, should I call someone about the girl?" Alexander's eyes flashed, a protective edge sharpening his tone as he replied, "No, she's with me." The storm outside rumbled, its echo matching the storm within him, urging him to hold tight to this fragile moment before it slipped away. The storm's rumble vibrated through the walls of the Voss Grand Hotel's kitchen, a low growl that seemed to mirror the turmoil churning in Alexander Voss's chest as he stood protectively near Lily, her small form still perched on the stool, her golden hair glowing faintly under the harsh lights. The faded photograph she'd snatched back now burned in his mind, its image, a man with blue eyes hauntingly like his own, stirring a disquiet he couldn't shake. Lily hugged her teddy bear, her soup bowl now empty, her blue eyes darting nervously toward the waiter who lingered by the door, his suspicious gaze like a shadow threatening to swallow her fragile safety. Alexander's heart raced, his tailored blue suit feeling like a costume hiding the raw vulnerability this child had unearthed. "No one's calling anyone," he said sharply to the waiter, his voice carrying the weight of a man used to command, yet softened by a newfound tenderness. The waiter nodded reluctantly and retreated, but the tension hung thick, like the steam curling from the cooling pots. Alexander turned to Lily, his throat tight. "You're safe here, I promise," he said, crouching to meet her gaze, his own blue eyes searching hers for answers he wasn't ready to face. She nodded, a flicker of trust in her expression, but her small fingers clutched the photo tighter, as if guarding a secret too heavy for her tiny shoulders. "Let's get you somewhere quieter," he suggested, his mind racing to shield her from prying eyes. He led her through a side door to a private suite, the plush carpet and golden chandeliers a stark contrast to her ragged dress. The room felt too grand, too cold for her, and Alexander's chest ached at the thought of her sleeping in an alley while he'd built this palace of excess. "Tell me about your mommy," he urged gently, sitting beside her on a velvet couch, the storm's muffled roar seeping through the windows. Lily's voice trembled as she spoke of her mother, a former waitress now frail and sick, abandoned years ago by a wealthy man who'd promised love but left them with nothing. "He was supposed to take care of us," she whispered, her words cutting Alexander deeper than any boardroom. Betrayal. The story echoed his own fears, his relentless pursuit of success, his avoidance of love, the women he'd left behind in his climb to power. A mirror moment gripped him. Had his ambition blinded him to lives he'd touched, lives he'd broken? "I'm sorry you went through that," he said, his voice cracking, the weight of his own loneliness surfacing like a long-buried wound. Lily's hand brushed his, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. Desperate to act, he pulled out his phone and texted his private investigator friend. "Find out about a girl named Lily, lives in the alley near my hotel. Mother's a former employee. Urgent." As he hit send, his phone buzzed almost instantly with a reply that stopped his breath. "Alex, her mother worked at your first hotel 7 years ago. Name's Sarah, you knew her." The words hit like a punch, a flood of memories, brief, passionate nights with a waitress, a life he'd walked away from, crashing over him. His hands shook, the phone slipping slightly as he stared at Lily, her blue eyes so like his own, her golden hair a mirror of a past he'd tried to forget. Was it possible? The question clawed at him, raw and terrifying, as the sweet silence pressed in, broken only by Lily's soft humming, a melody that felt like a ghost from his own heart. The investigator's next message loomed, unspoken, as Alexander's gaze locked on the photograph still clutched in her hand, the truth teetering on the edge of revelation, threatening to unravel everything he'd built. The silence in the plush suite of the Voss Grand Hotel was suffocating, broken only by Lily's soft humming, a fragile melody that seemed to weave through the storm's distant growl outside. Alexander Voss sat frozen on the velvet couch, his blue eyes locked on the faded photograph clutched in Lily's small hands, its shadowy image of a man with his own features burning into his soul. The investigator's message pulsed in his mind. Sarah, a waitress from his first hotel, a woman he'd known 7 years ago, stirring a maelstrom of guilt and dread that threatened to drown him. His tailored blue suit felt like a lie, its sharp lines mocking the chaos within as he grappled with the possibility that Lily, this hungry, golden-haired girl, might be tied to his past in a way he'd never imagined. Lily's humming faltered, her blue eyes lifting to meet his, wide with a trust that pierced his heart like a blade. "Are you okay, mister?" she asked, her voice a whisper, her teddy bear pressed close as if sensing his turmoil. Before he could answer, a sharp knock shattered the moment, and the suite's heavy door swung open to reveal a frail woman, her face pale and eyes wild with panic. "Lily!" she cried, stumbling forward, her thin frame wrapped in a worn coat, her cough rattling like the storm outside. It was Sarah, Lily's mother, tracked down by hotel security after hours of searching the rain-soaked alleys. She rushed to Lily, enveloping her in a desperate embrace, tears streaming as she whispered, "I thought I'd lost you forever." Alexander stood, his legs unsteady, his throat tight with a mix of relief and unease as he watched their reunion. Sarah's gaze flicked to him, and for a fleeting moment, recognition flashed in her eyes, sharp, raw, and laced with something darker, like betrayal. "You're Alexander Voss," she said, her voice low, almost accusatory, as she held Lily tighter. The air thickened, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. "Thank you for helping her," she added, but her tone was guarded, her eyes avoiding his, as if hiding a truth too painful to voice. Lily clung to her mother, yet her small hand reached for Alexander's, a gesture that tethered him to the moment, grounding him in a storm of emotions he couldn't navigate. "Don't let her take me yet," Lily whispered to him, her voice trembling with fear of being torn from this fleeting haven. Alexander's heart cracked. How could he? Let her go back to an alley, to hunger, to a life he might have unknowingly shaped? "You're both safe here," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos within, as he gestured to the suite. "Stay as long as you need. I'll get a doctor for you," he told Sarah, noting her pallor, the way her cough seemed to steal her breath. She nodded, reluctant, her eyes still wary, as if his kindness was a debt she couldn't afford. He arranged for a hotel room for them, his mind racing with questions he didn't dare ask. Why did Sarah's recognition feel like a wound? And why did Lily's eyes, so like his own, stir a longing he'd buried beneath years of ambition? As he escorted them to a nearby room, Sarah's hand brushed his arm, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him, rekindling memories of a summer long ago, nights of laughter, stolen glances, a connection he'd severed for the sake of his empire. The hallway's soft lights cast shadows on Lily's golden hair, and Alexander's pulse quickened, the investigator's words echoing, "You knew her." The truth hovered, sharp and unyielding, as he glanced at the photograph still in Lily's grasp, its edges worn from years of being held. Was it possible he'd left more than a broken heart behind? The question gnawed, a quiet terror mingling with a desperate hope, as he stood at the threshold of their room, watching Lily curl up beside her mother, the storm outside a mirror to the one raging within him, urging him to face a past he'd spent years running from. The soft glow of the hallway lights in the Voss Grand Hotel cast long shadows as Alexander Voss stood at the threshold of the room, where Lily and her mother, Sarah, now rested, the storm outside a relentless echo of the turmoil twisting in his gut. The door clicked shut behind them, but the weight of Sarah's guarded glance and Lily's trusting blue eyes lingered, searing into him like a brand. He clutched his phone, the investigator's message, "You knew her," pulsing like a heartbeat, each word a splinter digging deeper into his carefully guarded past. Alone in the dim corridor, Alexander, in his tailored blue suit, felt like a cage, his wealth a hollow shield against the truth he could no longer outrun. He sank against the wall, his breath shallow, and fumbled for the old locket he always carried, a relic from a life he'd tried to forget. With trembling fingers, he snapped it open, revealing a faded photo of a younger Sarah, her smile radiant, her eyes full of a love he'd walked away from 7 years ago. The realization hit like a tidal wave. Lily, with her golden hair and blue eyes so like his own, was his daughter. His knees buckled, and he slid to the floor, the locket slipping from his hand to clatter on the marble. The memory of that summer flooded back, Sarah's laughter in his tiny office, her gentle touch during late-night talks, his decision to leave her behind when ambition called, unaware she was pregnant. He'd chosen power over love, building an empire while she faced hardship alone, raising their child in the shadows of his success. A mirror moment gripped him, raw and merciless. He'd spent years running from connection, fearing it would weaken him, only to find his greatest failure staring back in the form of a hungry 6-year-old. Tears burned his eyes, the first he'd shed since his parents' death decades ago, each one a confession of the life he'd denied. He stumbled to his feet, driven by a desperate need to see Lily again, to make right what he'd broken. He knocked softly and entered their room, finding Lily asleep on the bed, her teddy bear tucked under her chin, the faded photograph beside her. Sarah sat nearby, her frail frame hunched, her cough softer now in the warmth of the suite. Alexander knelt beside Lily, his heart fracturing as he traced her small face, so much like his own, a living echo of his mistakes. "I didn't know," he whispered to himself, the words choking in his throat, a plea to a past he couldn't change. Sarah's eyes met at his, sharp with pain, but softened by exhaustion, and he saw the weight of years she'd carried alone. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with suspicion and old wounds. "Because I failed you," he admitted, his voice breaking, the truth spilling out like blood. "I left, and I didn't look back. But seeing her, it's like seeing my own soul, starving for something I didn't know I'd lost." Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and she smiled at him, murmuring, "Daddy?" as if her heart sensed what her mind couldn't yet grasp. The word shattered him, a single syllable that held a lifetime of regret and redemption. Alexander's hand trembled as he brushed her golden hair, his gaze locked on her, the daughter he'd never known he had. Sarah tensed, her breath catching, as if she, too, felt the truth teetering between them. The photograph lay on the bed, its image a silent accusation, and Alexander's chest tightened with a fear he'd never known, not of losing his empire, but of losing this fragile chance to be more than the man he'd been. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath, the world poised on the edge of a revelation that could either heal or destroy, as Alexander stood at the crossroads of his past and the family he'd unknowingly abandoned. The air in the dimly lit hotel room felt thick with unspoken truths, the storm outside now a muted hum as Alexander Voss stood frozen, his blue eyes brimming with tears, locked on Lily's sleepy smile and the word "Daddy" that had slipped from her lips like a spark igniting a long-dormant fire. Sarah's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence, her frail form rigid on the chair beside the bed, her eyes boring into him with a mix of anguish and accusation, as if she'd always known this moment would come. The faded photograph of a younger Alexander lay between them on the bed, its worn edges a testament to years of Sarah's silent pain, a relic of the man who'd left her pregnant and alone. His tailored blue suit, once a symbol of his untouchable success, now felt like a shroud, heavy with the weight of his failures. He sank to his knees beside Lily, his heart pounding so fiercely he thought it might burst, the word "Daddy" echoing in his mind like a melody he'd forgotten how to play. "Sarah," he began, his voice raw, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know about her. I swear it." Her eyes flashed, a storm of her own brewing, years of scraping by in alleys, of soothing Lily's hunger with whispered promises, all because he'd chosen ambition over her love. "You didn't want to know," she spat, her voice low but venomous, each word a dagger honed by 7 years of betrayal. Alexander flinched, the truth slicing deeper than any boardroom defeat, his mind flashing to the nights he'd buried himself in work to escape the emptiness of his choices. "I was a coward," he admitted, his voice cracking, tears spilling freely now, carving tracks down his face. "I ran from love because I thought it would hold me back, but I've been running from myself all along." Lily stirred again, her small hand reaching for his, her touch a fragile bridge between his past and the present he longed to reclaim. "Don't cry, mister," she murmured, her blue eyes, so like his own, filled with a compassion that shamed him. Sarah's gaze softened, just a fraction, as she watched her daughter comfort the man who'd broken them. "What do you want now, Alexander?" she asked, her voice trembling, caught between rage and exhaustion. "To fix this," he said, his words fervent, desperate. "To give you both a home, a life, everything I should have given you then." He reached for Sarah's hand, but she pulled back, her cough rattling as she shook her head, the wounds too deep for easy promises. Yet Lily, oblivious to the weight of their history, climbed into his lap, her golden hair brushing his chin, and hugged him tightly, her warmth melting the ice around his heart. "You're nice," she whispered, and Alexander choked on a sob, holding her close, the daughter he'd never known he needed. He looked at Sarah, pleading silently for a chance, his soul laid bare. "I'll get you a doctor, a place to stay. Anything you need," he vowed, his voice steady despite the tears. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but let me try." Sarah's eyes glistened, her resolve wavering as she saw the sincerity in his face, the man she'd once loved, now humbled before her. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of their shared history, as Lily's soft breathing filled the silence, a reminder of the life they'd created despite the pain. Alexander's phone buzzed in his pocket, a crisis at one of his hotels, no doubt. But for the first time, he didn't care. His world now anchored to the child in his arms and the woman whose forgiveness he craved. Sarah's hand hovered near his, not quite touching, as if testing the possibility of trust. The storm outside faded to a drizzle, but inside, a different storm raged, one of guilt, hope, and the fragile promise of redemption, as Alexander waited for Sarah's answer, knowing it could change everything. The drizzle outside the Voss Grand Hotel had softened to a whisper, but the air in the room where Alexander Voss knelt beside Lily and Sarah was electric with unspoken possibilities, the weight of Sarah's hesitation hanging like a fragile thread ready to snap. Lily's small arms were still wrapped around Alexander, her golden hair tickling his tear-streaked face, her innocent trust a lifeline he clung to as Sarah's hand hovered near his, trembling with the ghosts of 7 years of pain. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, a relentless reminder of the empire he'd built, but he silenced it without a glance, his blue eyes fixed on Sarah, pleading for a chance to rewrite the story he'd broken. "I can't undo the past," he said, his voice low, raw with a vulnerability he'd never shown the world. "But I can be here now. For her. For you." Sarah's eyes, red-rimmed and weary, searched his face, tracing the lines of a man who'd aged in ambition, but now kind. Knelt humbled, his tailored blue suit rumpled, a symbol of a life he was ready to trade for something real. She exhaled, her cough quieter now, and whispered, "You don't know what it was like, raising her alone, watching her cry for food while your name was on every billboard." The words stung, each one a mirror reflecting his selfishness, but Lily's soft hum, a tune she'd made up in the alley, cut through the pain, grounding them both. Alexander reached into his wallet, pulling out a credit card and pressing it into Sarah's hand. "Take this. Get her clothes, food, a doctor, anything. I'll buy you a house, whatever you need to start over." Sarah stared at the card, then at Lily, who smiled up at her, whispering, "He's nice, Mommy." The words broke something in Sarah, and she nodded, tears spilling as she murmured, "Okay, but this isn't forgiveness, not yet." Alexander's heart leapt, a fragile hope blooming as he arranged for a doctor to visit that night, ensuring Sarah's health would be tended to. He spent the next hours sitting with Lily, listening to her chatter about her teddy bear's adventures, each word stitching him closer to the daughter he'd unknowingly abandoned. When the doctor arrived, confirming Sarah needed urgent care but could recover with treatment, Alexander felt a weight lift, replaced by a fierce resolve. He ignored another call from his assistant, some crisis about a failing hotel chain, and instead sketched out plans on a hotel notepad: a cozy house in a quiet Chicago suburb, a trust fund for Lily, a new life where hunger would never touch her again. As dawn broke, painting the room in soft pinks, Lily tugged his sleeve, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures, her, Sarah, and the kind Mr., standing under a bright sun. "This is us," she said, and Alexander's throat closed, tears falling as he hugged her tightly, whispering, "I love you, Lily. I always will." Sarah watched, her guarded heart softening, and for the first time she reached for his hand, her touch tentative but real. "We'll try," she said, her voice steady, a promise of healing. Alexander stepped back from his CEO role that day, delegating his empire to others, choosing instead to stay near Lily and Sarah, helping them move into a warm apartment he secured by noon. Weeks later, at a park under a clear sky, Lily laughed as she swung between them, her hand in his, Sarah's smile cautious but growing. "You taught me what matters," Alexander said, his voice thick, looking at his daughter, then at Sarah. "Kindness isn't my hotels, it's this, right here." The city skyline loomed in the distance, but for Alexander, the world was in this moment, a family reborn from regret, their bond a testament to love's power to mend even the deepest wounds, as Lily's laughter rang out, a melody of hope that would echo in his heart forever.